YouTube battle community, Rolling Stones fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we're here today to talk about the Rolling Stones' 1967 album, Between the Buttons, released on Decca Records in the UK and London Records in the US. This is a great album. You know, it's following the theme after Aftermath, where they just recorded their own songs. You know, there's no covers. Aftermath started that, and then Between the Buttons continued that feel, and they really hit a stride with this period. You know, their singles at this time, Ruby Tuesday, Let's Spend the Night Together, are on this album, but in England, obviously, they were not. That's just how they did things in England. They really had a peak here. They discovered that they could write really, really good songs and were incorporating different instruments. And Brian was doing different things instead of just playing guitar in the band. He was using dulcimer, sitar, all kinds of stuff. And the percussion was different. Their singing was different. They were trying different aspects of rock and roll and seeing how they can make it work in the Rolling Stones camp. And to really good results. This is one of my favorite albums they ever made. There's some cool history behind this thing. Nothing too exciting beyond the fact that they recorded it in like 4 different studios. They started recording this thing in August of '66 in Los Angeles at RCA Studios when they were on tour, and they actually had Brian Wilson come down to hang out and watch them do their song "My Obsession." Right? Yeah, "My Obsession," which actually became one of Brian's favorite songs. To this day. So I also think that probably inspired him to do a lot of the Rolling Stones-ish feels on Marcella later on in the early 70s, because Brian's a big Rolling Stones fan. So yeah, eventually they went back to England, to IBC Studios, and then they went to Olympic and Pi throughout most of October and November to finish up this album. Ended up putting out Have You Seen Your Mother Baby Sitting in the Shadows as a single, instead of putting it on an album. And so that kind of held over people for a little while. In the U.S., they got a live album, actually, the first live album from the Stones in the U.S. called Got Live If You Want It. That was a contractual thing that Andrew Loog Oldham had to put together, and they put that out, and the Stones weren't too happy with it because of the sound, and 2 of the songs weren't even live tracks, they were studio tracks, so they weren't too happy about that. And they consider Get Your Ya-Ya's out, the first actual live Stones album. But the Stones did this thing throughout the end of '66, and then it came out really, really quickly in January of '67 in England, and February 11th in the U.S., which is funny because like the next day they got busted for drugs at Redlands. So this must have been a big seller just for the news at the time. And this was like their document for a long time, throughout 1967 until Satanic Majesties Request came out, bar for a couple of singles here and there. This was like them in 1967. This was the Rolling Stones. This is the U.S. copy. This is a mono copy. And the biggest difference between this and the UK one, the UK one has Please Go Home and Backstreet Girl. This album dropped those 2 in favor of their big single, Ruby Tuesday and Let's Spend the Night Together. And I think that makes it work a lot better, actually. I think I like the US version a lot better than the UK one, simply because of those 2 songs. They're very, very strong tracks, so when you throw them on here, it makes for a better collection, if you ask me. The title came up because Charlie Watts was asking Andrew Loog Oldham what the title of the album should be, or what it will be, and Andrew said it was Between the Buttons. It's undecided. It's up in the air right now, and Charlie was like, alright, we're just going to call it Between the Buttons. And he drew this really cool picture, this comic on the back, which is great because it's basically like, it's this story. You read it, you have to do it. It says, between the buttons. To understand this little rhyme, you must first tap your foot in time. Then the buttons come much nearer, and the stones you see more clearer. And it's this whole poetry kind of thing in the back of this comic. But I love it. I think that's really cool that Charlie did that. So yeah, the Stones finished up recording their album and then finished up their last tour of the UK for like the next 4 years. They didn't do the UK again until like 1971. So that was probably the last time people saw Brian live in England, was during this time. Around this time also, Brian's role in the band, because he started this group as a blues rock band, and by this time the Stones' flavor was changing, times were changing, what they were ingesting was changing. So I mean, like, the whole thing was evolving, and they were staying up with that. And Brian didn't want to just play guitar in the band. He probably was getting bored, and he wanted to try new things. He was kind of an adventurous slightly crazy guy from what I've read about. And so he started to do like dulcimer and harpsichord and different Indian instruments like tabla and of course the sitar, to try to flavor up the feel of the stones to keep them fresh and not get stale. And that really adds a huge dimension to this thing. In terms of their style. And they dabble a little bit in psychedelia on this one. Not a whole lot, but they put their toes in the water to see how it feels. And I really like the tracks where they do that on. Very much like a couple of the tracks don't sound like anybody else. Like She Smiles Sweetly, to me, is like completely on their own, in their own little world. But then you get tracks like the last one, Something Happened to Me Yesterday, that you could almost see Dave Davies pulling that one off from the Kinks. So this album came out on January 20th in the UK. It hit number 3. Came out on February 11th in the US. And number 2 went gold. Then they went on the Ed Sullivan Show and played Let's Spend the Night Together. But Ed was like, that's not going to happen. You can't say that. So they did Let's Spend Some Time Together. Which apparently they rolled their eyes every time they sang it that way. But which is pretty funny. Typical Stones. So yeah, an all-original album. And let's just jump into this thing. So it opens up with their current single, Let's Spend the Night Together, which, for me, that's one of my favorite early Stones songs. I love the energy on it. I love the big pounding organ throughout this thing. It's just like all over this song. I love the vibe, the energy, the youthful spirit of it. You know, it's just a cool track. Just exciting. Just a big, exciting song. And their vocals on it are fantastic. You know, those group vocals that they do together are great. I love the guitars. Charlie's just beating the crap out of his drums in the background. Just a high-energy, spirited take. And I think a much better opener than Yesterday's Papers, which opens the UK one. This just makes you jump into it. That big vaudeville-style piano going on in the beginning. That ba-da-da-da-ba-ba background vocals, fantastic. Bowie's version is also really good, but this one, awesome. Yesterday's Papers, it's this a whole bunch of different instruments are on this one. You get xylophone, you get harpsichord. I like the doo-doo vocals in the background. There's a real cool feel and lots of percussion all over this thing. I really like Charlie's style of playing on this one. Ruby Tuesday. Man, what a song. I mean, it's one of the best Stone songs of the 60s, and that chorus is so catchy, and so it begs you to sing along. You know, the instrumentation on that track is unbelievable. The double bass between Bill and Keith, where I guess Bill would push down the strings and Keith would pluck them or, you know, bow them. Unbelievable track. It's amazing that only like a couple years before they started writing their own songs and they came out with something like that with, you know, the nice flutes, the string arrangement, the piccolos. Unbelievable song. We've all heard it a million times, but really it sticks out very, very nicely on this song. Connection's a cool, fun, loose rocker. I love the crazy drum, the bass drum going on at one point. Excellent syncopation between the lyrics matching onto the beat. Really quick track, but really fun. You know, great song. She Smiled Sweetly. Again, this is one of my favorite songs on this album, or it might be my favorite song on this album. The vocal from Mick on this track is tender, it's delicate, it's watchful. And, you know, having that play on top of that really low, deep organ, really, really effective. I love Charlie's characteristic drums that kind of bounce in the background. It feels like blues, like a late-night smoky blues bar doing a little bit of acid. It's like a little touch of acid. It's got a real sparseness here, and that sparseness is exciting because it's that classic case of, you know, what you don't play is what speaks more. But I love that delicate, stoned kind of approach to it. Great track. Cool, Calm, and Collected. I really love this song because it's got this, like, again, this vaudeville approach throughout the verses, but then the chorus has that break. Cool, Calm, Collected. It sounds like a Bob Dylan song. Real bouncing, kind of a foot tapping kind of thing, but that break is just trippy. And then it goes back into the, you know, sort of vaudevillian piano there. But the end of it has like this like comb on paper kind of approach. It sounds like Seaside Rendezvous by Queen. I can almost see Mickey Dolenz singing these parts at the end. Yeah, and it gets really crazy at the end, so it's not very cool, calm, or collected. That was a cop out of a pun there. Track 1 on side 2, all sold out. is one of my favorite songs of this album too. It's got a real rock groove to it. Super soulful, expressive drums, straight up rock and roll. You know, a real clean, tight, messy, combination together to make that classic Stones sound. This awesome bass at the end. I love the background vocals. The solo was really cool. It's got a great tone on his guitar. Yeah, very cool song. My Obsession has like a Get Off My Cloud type of drum beat to it. Big fuzzy bass. I love the distortion. Really cool melody, or just a straight up rock song. Real gritty at times. Who's Been Sleeping here has this like fading and distortion that comes in a little bit into the song, and then there's like a really sharp solo. I love the harmonica on this thing and the dancing piano that kind of blend in. I feel like it's a bit of a long song, and you kind of get the point after a while. The story-wise, like, all right, we get it. This person might be getting around a little bit. Complicated has really cool tom-tom use all over this song. I love the splashy hi-hats. For me, I love the Rolling Stones sound almost entirely because of Charlie Watts' drumming. He's got this real, I wouldn't call it like rickety or wooden approach to his playing, but he's got a stiffness that in doing so creates a looseness, because his slight stiffness on the drums with his swing lets the other guys swing even more on top of it. So even though he's a perfect metronome, it sounds like the group is slightly falling apart at the same time, which creates an amazing experience and basically the Rolling Stones sound, but they are very tight with each other. That's their trick. It's almost like learning a song by the Cars. It sounds super easy, but it's not. Or maybe I just suck at music. Miss Amanda Jones has this classic like Route 66 type feel, straight up rock and roll. I can almost see this song being on Exile on Main Street. I would think it would fit there totally. And the last song on this album, Something Happened to Me Yesterday, is apparently about Keith's first acid trip. It actually features Keith singing the chorus. It's the first time Keith had like a lead vocal bit. And Mick and Keith kind of switch in between the verses and the choruses. But again, another total Kinks song. I can totally see the Kinks doing this song. Especially around this time, Sunny Afternoon, and then eventually Village Green, Preservation Society. This would fit in with that perfectly well, I think. Overall, I think this album is unique in their canon because this was like the last time they had like sort of a pop feel. After this was Satanic Panic, wrong band. Satanic Majesties Request came out. That was more of a grown-up, let's get freaky, let's get stoned and see what happens. And after that, they became like a grown-up blues band. Not appealing to the teeny bopper crowd anymore. Songs like Sympathy for the Devil or Gimme Shelter, Brown Sugar, like they kind of grew up. So this is like the last album they put out where they were kind of like youthful, for lack of a better word. The album cover is great. They had done a long night of recording, and this picture was taken at 5:30 in the morning on Primrose Hill. And the photographer, his name was Greg Mankiewicz, I think, or Jared Mankiewicz. He was a little bit pissed off at Brian because Brian's just kind of like goofing around. Like everyone else has this like cool, chill look, and Brian's just like goofing around. But that's kind of how he was. And this was like the beginning of his slow, sad demise before his girlfriend was taken by Keith. So that must have sucked. But yeah, I love this picture. I think it's very, very cool. It's also one of the first album covers from the Stones to have like a color on it. Like everything else was like black and white or really like up close pictures of them. So to see like a background is kind of cool. And he used like a Vaseline and card effect to make this like trippy kind of glow happen, which is cool because Keith and Bill look stretched out, which is kind of nice. Here's the back cover, so you get a better picture of the comic on the back. I like the Between the Buttons Rolling Stones logo. I think this is the original inner sleeve. It mentions London Records up there. And this is a mono copy on a red label. One thing I don't know a whole lot about is if there's a big difference between the red and the blue, because I think I've seen both for mono and stereo. So if anyone knows more about the variations of the London record label, I'd love to hear about that. I have a very hard time finding these albums in good shape. The early 60s Stones albums are either hard to find or completely destroyed. people love them, so they played the crap out of them. Overall, though, I really, really enjoy this album. I think it's a fun listen. There's some great songs on here, and it has that youthful spirit that kind of disappears over the next few albums. While they did make some of the best music of their career after that, this energy of this era kind of came to a close, and I think it went out with kind of a good bang. But yeah, great songs. Let's Spend the Night Together, Ruby Tuesday, She Smiled Sweetly, all sold out. Something Happened to Me Yesterday, Cool Comic Collected. I really, there isn't a bad song on this album, so I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. I wouldn't go any higher than that, only because, like, you know, having the UK version in there and then having the US version be a different thing, that, I feel like that kind of changes the process a little bit. If there was only one copy of this album, I probably would have given it an even lower score, because it didn't have Let's Spend the Night Together and Ruby Tuesday on it. Those are, for me, big tracks, and they really make this album, they beef it up a lot. So I'm a sucker for the US versions of a lot of things, especially the Beatles albums. American Rubber Soul, that's the one. That's the real one. Alright, let's talk about that. So here we go. Rolling Stones, Between the Buttons. I think it's a fantastic album. 8 out of 10. There we go. Let me know what you think about it. And my name is Giggens. This has been Album Reviews with the Rolling Stones. Ladies and gentlemen, the Rolling Stones. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.